Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the latest episode of the Cortalinhas Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Lowy, here today with a very special discussion for you. So far, start off Cortalinhas in 2023. We've had a Benfica and a Sporting fan on, Cristiano Oliveira and Sam Fonseca, to discuss the Derby de Lisboa. We had Goal TV announcer Nino Torres from Peru, so we've had a Peruvian, had an Englishman, and a Portuguese American. Now we've got two English brothers, one in London, one in Newcastle, two recurring guests who I've had the pleasure of discussing football and who have their own fantastic podcast on Portuguese football called Long Ball Futebol. This is Barney Carter-Phillips and Albert Carter-Phillips. How are you guys today?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Zach. Thanks so much for having us on again. It's an absolute pleasure. I feel like I always say it every time I come on, but yeah, your podcast was like the pinnacle for us. So yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here.
This is our Taça da Liga final. So thanks for having us.
Awesome. It's always a pleasure to have you guys on because you do a fantastic job covering Portuguese football. And once again, guys, make sure to give them a follow. They deserve it. They've got a fantastic podcast and great coverage on their Twitter account. So definitely check it out. I want to start off by going with a few questions from our listeners. So the first one comes from Nate Salt in Minnesota. I'm raising a kid that loves Porto, and he wants to know, can anyone catch Benfica this season? Mostly his team. And that is Aiden, or as he's known to his coaches and teammates, the Porto kid. Okay. Well, first off, Aiden, let me say this as somebody who is approaching 25 in a few months. You're going to have to grow up eventually and realize that Porto are not going to come close to what they had last season. Okay, that was a dream. That was heaven for a Portista to, sell your best player and go up like 5 levels after January. This is something that I've never seen any team do. To win the domestic double, to lose just one league match all season, absolutely insane. And so, yeah, Porto, been a kind of interesting year for them. They sold 2 key players in midfield with Vitinha, Fabio Vieira, Las Chancel, and Bemba on a free transfer. Replaced him with David Carmo for 20 million euros, who hasn't played a single match in 100 or so days. And yet things not too bad for Football Club Porto. They've won the first 2 trophies of the season, beat Tondela in the Supertaça, beat Sporting in the Taça da Liga final. They've won the last 4 trophies in Portuguese football. We call that a calendar year Grand Slam in tennis. So not too bad for Porto. 8 points behind Benfica and have a game in hand. So if they win that game in hand, then they'll be just 5 points behind Benfica. Porto chasing more silverware. They're going to be taking on lower tier Académico de Viseu, the same team that they beat in the Taça da Liga semifinals, actually. Going to be taking them on midweek in the Taça de Portugal quarterfinals. Following that up with a match at Sporting, going to be hosting Rio Ave, and then taking on Inter in the Champions League. So some interesting matches coming up for Porto, for Sergio Conceição's men. But I think that, one aspect that I really wanted to touch on is that when you look at the top 4 teams in Portugal. Okay, Benfica, 53 points. Porto, 45 points, a game in hand. Braga, 43 points, a game in hand on Benfica. Sporting, 35 points, 2 games in hand on Benfica. So looking at those top 4 teams, all of those teams lost a key player, one of their best players in the entire team, on deadline day. Okay, Benfica sold Enzo Fernandez to Chelsea for a British transfer record, 121 million euros, I believe. Braga sold their center forward Vitinha to Marseille for 30 million euros on deadline day, and Sporting selling their right back Pedro Porro to Tottenham Hotspur on deadline day for 45 million euros. A key thing to mention here is none of those teams were able to sign a replacement. Obviously they sold these players on deadline day. None of them sold a replacement. Porto, on the other hand, they had zero business whatsoever. So apart from loaning out Nanu to Santa Clara, Porto conducted zero business whatsoever in January. And I do feel like that stability could be something that works in their favor. Obviously, still a lot of points to catch up on Benfica. But right now, what do we make of this season from Porto?
Well, the one thing I would say is you talk about Porto not losing anyone on deadline day, but they also didn't bring anyone in on deadline day. And I wonder how big that will be, the fact that there was very little business done in January. And that does surprise me because obviously I don't know the state of Porto's finances and what's possible for them. But if, from a hypothetical point of view, if I was someone in the Porto board, I would have been looking at the second half of the season saying, we need investment and we need to improve the side if we're going to have a good go at the Champions League and at the title. Because I think if things stay the same as they have done, then no, to answer the contributor's question, I don't think they can catch Benfica, not because Porto are not a good side. I think they're a great side, not obviously what they were last season, but still perfectly capable of winning most games in the league this season. But I don't think they've got enough to overtake Benfica. So if they really wanted to have a good go at the title and overturn 5 points on Benfica, which is a lot, let's be honest, then I would have wanted to see some kind of investment in January. It hasn't happened. And personally, I don't think it's a disaster because I think, to put it bluntly, you can't win the league every year. And I think they're still doing pretty well and the squad's in decent shape. And maybe they'll look to rebuild in the summer rather than spending a lot of money in January, which is a notoriously difficult window. But yeah, I think they're not, for me, showing quite enough to suggest that they will pull off what would be a very difficult feat in overturning Benfica's lead. But like that said, strange things had happened. There's great players in that side. Let's not forget some of the players they've still got, Taremi, Otavio, those kind of players. But no, for me personally, without that January investment, I don't think there's quite enough to mount a large-scale comeback in the second.
Where would you have liked to have seen that investment come?
Possibly in the area where Vitinha was playing last year. And I know it's the obvious thing to say. It's such an obvious thing to say, but I do think they have missed that. And they've done well with kind of rebalancing the side. A lot of the creativity is now coming from the wings in Galeno and Otavio, and they've still got great options up front as they had last year. So it's not like it's a disaster in midfield at the moment because I still think, the emergence of Eustáquio has been great and there's, Uribe's been a bit hit and miss, but still a solid player. So there's no disasters, that's what I'm trying to get across here. There's no disaster for Porto. The season's been fine. But if they'd wanted to be ambitious, they would have needed to bring someone in the January transfer market.
If I was to sort of counter that slightly, the only thing I'd say in Porto's favour is that I think consistently for the last few seasons now that their business has always been with an eye to the future and sort of preparing the squad for those departures that may or may not happen. So you look at players like Pepe, Aquino, Veron, even Danny Namaso to some extent. These are players that we still haven't seen them at their best. They certainly all got levels to go, and in that sense could be a new signing. But then to contrast that to, say, the other clubs who have been active in this window, that will sort of come down to squad management. And I think these players who haven't been given as much time as perhaps they would have liked themselves, they're not going to have that new signing bounce that some of these other clubs are going to get with their signings. They might be frustrated perhaps with the lack of game time. But yeah, the point I'm making there is just I think there's certain players in that squad who have got another level to go and can offer something that we haven't yet seen.
Last time around, Porto beat Vizela 1-0 via late header from Ivan Marcano. This time around, they beat Vizela 2-0. Pepe opening the scoring before the break. Mehdi Taremi ending his goal drought with a goal in the 86th minute. So not an easy feat, taking on Vizela without Steven Eustáquio or Otavio, and yet getting a clean sheet, getting a win. I think that there's a lot to be said for that performance. And another thing that I think is also worth mentioning, Evan Nielsen returning to the side, missed about a month due to injury, returned though against Marittimo, came off the bench at halftime for Taremi. I thought it was an interesting substitution at the time, but it paid off, grabbing the assist for their first goal. This time around, he also grabs the assist for Pepe's opener. How important is Evan Nielsen going to be going forward for Porto? Because we saw just how crucial he was in that striker partnership with Mehdi Taremi. You know, how big do you think that his return is going to be for Porto? And also, once we get a fully fit Porto squad, I'm curious. How do you think Sergio Conceição is going to shape his team up? Because, you know, Steven Eustáquio doing very well in central midfield. I can definitely see your point about the lack of a midfield signing. You know, I will never understand why Porto decided that they should sign a third-choice goalkeeper in Samuel Portugal for 7 million euros on deadline day and not sign a midfielder. That will never make sense to me no matter what, even if Porto win the quadruple this year. But with that being said, still a lot of quality. You've got Otavio, you know, arguably their most important player. You've got Wenderson Galeno doing very well on that left wing. You've got Taremi and Evan Nielsen, dynamic strike duo. And you've got Pepe, who has been in and out of the team this year, you know, has struggled to get in at times, but grabbed an assist in the Taça da Liga final against Sporting, grabbed an assist against Marittimo, and opened the scoring against Vizela. So a lot of names to keep in mind here. But yeah, Barney, how important do you think Evan Nielsen's return is going to be, and where do you see Conceição fitting in all these players?
Yeah, I think Evan Nielsen's returns is fairly important. I think his partnership with Taremi at the start of the season just seemed to be blossoming. You know, they really seem to be connecting, and obviously that injury sort of stuttered that. I am a fan of Tony Martinez. I think I always feel like he hasn't been given enough opportunities, but then I'm actually, in recent performances, I'm inclined to say he hasn't grasped the opportunity he was given, and so Evan Nielsen certainly will come in and start in that attack. And I think there's another player at Porto who, you know, is a promising young player and has certainly got a huge room to grow in terms of his development. So I think he could, if he kicks on, he could be he could be a huge player. Huge player for them in the run-in. And I think Pepe is the interesting one for me, because I think Otavio on the right and Galeno on the left is the way that Conceição will go with the wingers and a midfield of the relay, and Eustáquio is certainly, in my opinion, their strongest midfield. So that's how I see him playing it, certainly in the Champions League, I would say. But then, like you mentioned, that he grabbed an assist at the weekend. I think he's starting to show a bit more of what he can offer in his team. He's a really exciting young player. So yeah, it's a nice problem for Conceição to have, trying to fit Pepe into the team as well.
Yeah, I haven't got much more to add on that. I agree. I think in an ideal world, Conceição wants to play Otavio on the right and Galeno on the left, and I think Eustáquio and Uribe would be the midfield, which is interesting because I don't think Pepe starts. And then the strike partnership, I think Conceição probably does want to bring Evan Nielsen back in up front, but then of course it's not as easy as that. He's got to show the form to do it. I'm sure he will. I hope he will, because I predicted a bigger season this year than it's been, obviously injuries permitting. And he looked like a really good prospect at the end of last season, especially with Taremi at the age that he's at, and his contract coming up. It looks like, you know, from what I've heard a lot of Porto fans say, if he's going to leave, it's probably going to be this summer, while they can still get some kind of transfer fee for him. And Evan Nielsen would have been the one that you'd hoped would have stepped up and been the main man up front. So, yeah, I agree with what Barney said. I think Pepe will probably be an impact player off the bench. And then I think, Evan Nielsen, if he stays fit and can get back up to form, I think he comes into partner Taremi. And I think that was a partnership that looked pretty good last season, and they'll want that to get they'll want to get that partnership back up to where they want it to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that Otavio is guaranteed to start whenever he's fit. So I think it'll be between Pepe and Wenderson Galeno on the other flank. You've still got plenty of other players to consider, such as Gabriel Veron, Andre Franco, Dani Namaso Loder. One player, though, that I really want to touch up on before we end our Porto discussion, João Mario, okay? Grabbed 2 assists against Arauca in a 4-0 win in the Taça de Portugal. Following match, grabs an assist against Famalicão. Following match, scores a phenomenal goal to beat Vitória 1-0. Following match, grabs an assist in the Taça de Liga against Viseu. And just at the weekend, grabbed an assist for Meritaremi's goal. So I really do think that João Mario just turned 23 years old and is probably playing the best football of his career. This is a player who is not a natural right back. You know, neither was Tecatito Corona, and he was arguably Porto's best right back since they sold Ricardo Pereira. So, you know, the right back position has been something that Porto have been have struggled with in recent years. I think that a lot of Porto fans have not always thought that João Mario was the long-term solution at right back, but I do think that we have to give him credit. He's playing some fantastic football. He really looks like a new player since the start of the year. And, you know, I'm curious because for me, Pedro Porro is the best right back that I have seen in the Primeira Liga since I started watching Portuguese football. I'm aware that other people have been around longer than me. They'll probably have someone else, but I have no doubt that Pedro Porro was the best right back that I've seen in Portugal. And I'm curious, now that Porro is in London, who do we consider to be the best right back in Portugal? Because right now, I would probably go with João Mario.
Yeah, on current form, I think that's a very good shout. Yeah, listen, I'm really happy for him. In my head, I'm not sure if that's actually true, but in my head, he's kind of the same generation as Diogo Costa, Vitinha, Fabio Vieira, and I'd never think he's quite achieved what they achieved in a Porto shirt. And he's definitely had a lot of stick from Porto fans recently. And it has been a tricky position for them. They've had Manafar, they've had him. Neither have quite been a right back of the standard that they wanted. But as you say, credit where credit's due, because he's been a different player in 2023 and he's playing, like you say, I completely agree, the best football of his career at Porto. Definitely. So on current form, I would have to agree. It's a really tough question though, because, you know, despite some of the great clubs and the great young players we have in this league, I think there is a dearth of great right backs at the moment. You've got Alexander Barr at Benfica, who I think is a decent looking player, but never quite had the consistency for me to be considered one of the best. Pedro Porro was, for me, you could have a debate about him being the best player in the league, let alone the best right back. You know, I'm not saying he was, but he was in that conversation. So yeah, there's not quite that consistent right back now that he's gone that you will say is a natural successor. I was trying to think of a good young player that I could recommend before this podcast, but no one really sprang to mind. Barney knows a few. I can see him nodding. But yeah, for me, it has to be João Mario. And after that, I struggled to think of another one, really.
No, my recommendation isn't... I wouldn't put them in the same bracket as João Mario or possibly even Alexander Barr, but Pedro Mario from Boavista, I think I've been very impressed with him at right back. He sort of plays a similar role to Pedro Porro at Sporting, that right wing back role sometimes. And but in terms of João Mario's development, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Zach, where you said he's been a different player since the turn of the year, because I felt at the first half of the season, he sort of had an underwhelming start. You know, we didn't see enough from him, but since he's come back, he's been absolutely electric, really, on that right hand side, and works. I think it works really well with Otavio, and they've formed a good understanding between each other. So yeah, I'd go João Mario best right back.
Absolutely. Plenty of other names to keep in mind. Ricardo Escaio having a very good performance against Braga. Victor Gomez as well, doing well at the weekend. Alexander Ba with a fantastic solo goal at the weekend. So I would go with João Mario for sure. But there are plenty of other names to be mentioned. Moving on to the first match of the weekend. We saw Santa Clara taking on Boa Vista at the Azores. This was a really interesting game because we actually saw 3 different braces. So Salvador Agra sets up Vincent Sasso's opening goal, Vincent Sasso being a center back. Gabriel Silva equalizes at the hour mark for Santa Clara. 4 minutes later, Salvador Agra sets up Vincent Sasso for another goal. So brace of assists for Agra, brace of goals for Sasso, and a brace of goals for Gabriel Silva, scoring the equalizer in the 86th minute, snatch a point for Santa Clara. I am a bit worried for the Santa Clara team. I'm not going to lie. They are 2 points above Maritimo in the relegation playoff spot, and frankly have been in very poor form. Went into the World Cup break with a 3-1 win against Estoril Praia. Since returning, though, they've lost to Gil Vicente, they lost to Braga, prompting them to change managers, sack Mario Silva, and go with Jorge Simão. Under Simão, they drew 0-0 to Portimonense while playing down a man for most of the match. They lost 3-0 to Benfica. They lost 2-1 to Casapia, and they drew 2-2 to Santa Clara. They drew 2-2 to Boa Vista. So just 3 goals scored for Santa Clara since the return, and all three of them coming in their last 2 games. And I don't know. I've had some. They have definitely left a lot to be desired. But I do think that one player who could be really important for them going forward is Gabriel Silva, 20 years of age, on loan from Palmeiras, and I really do think has been a bright spark in attack. There's a lot of questions. Who's going to step up for Santa Clara? Obviously, selling Hidemasa Morita to Sporting, selling Lincoln to Fenerbahce, 2 massive pillars. But how important do you guys think Gabriel Silva is going to be in their fight against relegation?
I think it's going to be huge, Zach, because I think he's the only player at that club at the moment who seems to be doing anything of any sort. He's got that ability to make things happen. He's caught my eye for a little while now, and I think he's such a good dribbler. He obviously gets fouled quite a lot as well. His only improvement, I would say, is in his passing and his final ball. He seems a bit sloppy in that aspect, but otherwise, he's the one in that Santa Clara team getting on the ball and getting them up the pitch, and nobody else seems to be able to sort of make anything happen. So I think he's going to be an absolutely huge player for them. And as you mentioned, he's 20 years old, such young age. He seems that he's been given a lot of responsibility. I think Costina seems to be benefiting from him in the team, having someone to sort of seek out and get the ball to. But otherwise, I remember texting Albert the other week when I saw the Santa Clara lineup and sort of noting that I barely knew anyone because there's been so many players come in and so many changes to the 11. So yeah, they're in a tricky situation, but I certainly think Gabriel Silva looks like a player who might be able to. I'm not going to say rescue them, but try and rescue them.
Yeah, listen, I'm happy for the kid. I think 2 goals. I think what was it? One tap in and 1 fluke, was it?
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want to be a downer in this segment, but I thought it was a really poor game. I thought it was a game of real low quality. I think, on the one hand, you had Boa Vista, who scored, I think it was 2 goals from 2 set pieces, and I think it was very poor defending from Santa Clara on both of those, and it was far too easy for Boa Vista to get those goals. And then on the other hand, you've got Boa Vista conceding 2 against Santa Clara, who can't really get a goal against anyone else. Boa Vista had a game last week against the Ruka, which I think flattered to deceive when they won 4-2. Against Portimonense, excuse me. They won 4-2. They scored 4 goals against the worst team in the league at the moment in Portimonense, and they conceded 2 very sloppy goals. So I think that was it didn't really give an accurate impression of where this team is at. I think both of these teams are in trouble, Zach, if I'm honest with you. That's what I took from this game, because Both teams look really poor, and I think it was a case of two poor teams cancelling each other out. I really worry about Santa Clara. I look at that team, and I don't know where the goals are coming from. I look at the starting 11, and I don't know where the quality is. And after spending, well, not so much money, but after signing so many players, I think that's a real worry. And I hope some of those players will start to perform. There's players like Victor Bobson who've done well at different parts of the season, but perhaps haven't sustained it. And then Boavista, who I think are a team in a bit of a slump themselves, which perhaps hasn't been recognised. Like I say, a draw in this game, a win and a draw in their last two games, you might think that's decent form. But I think if you really look at the performances, I was lucky enough to watch both games. If you look at the performances, I think that's a team who are struggling to defend and don't look too convincing in front of goal. People are going to slate me for saying that after they scored 4 against Portimonense, but genuinely, if you watch the game, I think those goals are kind of handed to them on a plate. So these are two teams that I worry about. You look at Paços de Ferreira doing much better now. You look at even Marítimo, who are starting to grind out results, perhaps in not showing as much quality as Paços, but are grinding out results. And Santa Clara in real danger, Zach, of getting sucked into this big time because they're not performing. I was surprised when they went for Jorge Simão as manager because after a string of progressive managers, I think he's a regressive choice. I don't see them playing progressive football under him. Maybe that's harsh. If there's anyone listening who knows more about him, feel free to let me know. But that's my impression of watching him over the last few years. So, yeah, apologies. I want to think of something positive to say, but I think these are two teams who are in a bad part of the season, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, I really like Gabriel Silva a lot. Very unpredictable dribbler, really impressive talent. I am concerned a lot about Santa Clara. Am I concerned about Boavista? I think that's still a bit too early, okay? I mean, looking at the start of the year, they've beaten Gil Vicente 1-0. They lost 1-0 to Braga, who, in my opinion, they outplayed. They drew 1-1 to Chaves, last-minute equalizer from João Batista. They beat Portimonense 4-2 and drew 2-2 to Santa Clara, once again conceding a late equalizer. Facing off against Estoril Praia next, Santa Clara, on the other hand, are going to be taking on Arauca. Will be interesting to see what happens in those matches. You mentioned, Albert, Portimonense, worst team in the league. That is a bold assertion. Should be mentioned to our audience that we are currently recording this on Monday, and we are halfway through the first game of the day, Portimonense against Paços de Ferreira. Sporting will be taking on Rio Ave later on today, but currently 0-0 between Portimonense and Paços. If we look at the table, Paços de Ferreira are the worst team in the league, currently with 10 points. Given that they are drawing right now, whereas Portimonense have 21 points. So, I think that Portimonense just 6 points above Santa Clara, and yet, who sit in the relegation zone. And yet, I do agree. I think that it's safe to say that we can be worried about Portimonense. Going into the World Cup break with a 2-1 loss to Braga, and since returning, they've lost 2-1 to Casa Pia, 1-0 to Benfica, drew to Santa Clara, as we mentioned, and then lost 4-0 and 4-2 to Boavista. So we'll see what happens today against Paços. But, yeah, I share your concern as well with regards to Portimonense. And, guys, if you haven't yet, definitely make sure to check out my pinned tweet where I do a recap of each of the Primera Liga teams' January transfer window. And one thing that I will say with regards to Boavista is that I think that their stability, something that we don't usually associate with Boavista, is going to be helpful for them, because apart from loaning out a backup striker, Diego Llorente, to a lower tier side, they have not completed any January business. They've held on to some key players. Portimonense, on the other hand, been a very busy window for them, recognizing that they need to act quickly. They've brought in a lot of players such as Yoni Gonzalez, Park Ji-soo, no major departures apart from Everton going to the second tier of Japan. But yeah, guys, what do we make of Paulo Sergio's side? How concerned should we be about Portimonense right now?
Well, yeah, I've always had a soft spot for Paulo Sergio and Portimonense, but I think it's been hard to deny what's been going on in recent games. You know, and defensively, I mean, it's a backline of names that I've maybe not set at left back, but otherwise, you know, the backline of Fat Mufi, Pedro, Rovas, even Nakamura, the keeper, is rated. You know, you look at the stats; he's one of the better keepers in the league. But still, there's something that's happened in the last few games where it's all gone to pot, and you know, they just seem an absolute shambles, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly why that's occurred. But they just seem to be shipping sloppy goals at left, right, and centre, and it's diabolical, really. And we were questioning on our podcast last week whether Paulo Sergio will still be here with us this week, and it seems to be so far. But they're in a really sticky situation and struggling for goals as well. I think that's one of the other big things. You know, but you look at their signings in the striking area. Brian Rushers has since arriving from CD Nacional hasn't got a single goal. Ricardo Matos has sort of failed to make an impact since being sort of considered quite a shrewd bit of business. And then they're stuck with Wellington Junior as their sort of only goal scorer. I think he's netted 3 or something this season. So yeah, there's problems at the top, at the bottom, and yeah, it's not looking great at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to clarify my comments about them being the worst in the league, I'm talking about on current form, which I think is very accurate, because as Barney says, the defence is kind of, the wheels have fallen off that defence really, which is a real shame. But yeah, just the question I have for them and Paulo Sergio is that when a team is playing this badly, losing in the manner that they are, and just struggling so badly for results over the last 6-7 games, is it? How, as much as I love Paulo Sergio, how often in football do you see a manager rescue a situation like that? Because it doesn't happen very often with the best will in the world. If the players have gone, they've gone, and if the manager very rarely gets them back. So that's my concern, really, and not necessarily saying Paulo Sergio is a bad manager. I think he's a decent manager for this league. But if the players have left you, then I think, you know, that it's really hard to come back from that situation, sadly.
And to your point, Albert, Portimonense were the worst team in the league for the final few months of last season. Really was their impressive early start that saved them from relegation. Yeah. Do they have enough in the tank, though, to save themselves? Because, yeah, like you mentioned, it is very worrying for them. And another reason why it's worrying for them is the form of the league's 2 bottom sides. So Marítimo have been doing much better, I would say, since Jose Gomes took over. But one team that I want to talk about right now is Paços de Ferreira. They are currently bottom of the league with 10 points, given the fact that they are drawing right now to Portimonense. We'll see what happens with that game. But it's been a crazy season for Paços, okay? Last season, they hired César Peixoto midway through the campaign when it looked like they would be fighting relegation. Peixoto did a fantastic job getting them mid-table finish, and yet had a terrible start to this season, got sacked after they lost in the Cup to Vitória de Setúbal, then replaced by club legend Jose Mota returning after 13 years, and lasted just 7 games before being dismissed and replaced by, guess who? César Peixoto. So it's honestly been a decent start to Peixoto's second spell at the club just a few months later. But Peixoto starting off proceedings with a 1-1 draw against Chaves, then getting their first win since April and beating Rio Ave 1-0. Lost 2-1 to Braga via last-minute winner from Simon Bonza. Lost 2-0 to Benfica, and then beat Gil Vicente 2-1. So, yeah, Adrian Butzke opening the scoring, Nuno Lima grabbing another one, and Fran Navarro grabbing one back for Gil Vicente. And Paços getting another win, their second win of the season. And I think that there is enough that we've seen. There's enough matches left for us to say that we can't put the nail in the coffin for Paços left. I really think that we need to discuss a lot of these players, a lot of players who are having massive influences on this renaissance, whether that's Nicolas Gaitan putting in another man of the match performance, Nigel Thomas, Jordan Holsgrove, another player who's really impressed me. But I want to take a second to actually take a look at a few statistics, and I'm going to actually introduce a new section on Cortalinhas called the Stat of the Day, working with our friends at Goal Point, one of the best places for all things stats in Portuguese football and beyond. But yeah, they sent me a few interesting stats that I want to take a look at. So until when Peixoto came back, Paços had 54.4 actions when the opponent has the ball, 74.2 in the last few games. So that shows that they're a lot more aggressive. And they had 4.6% shot conversion, 7.5 now, a lot more efficient. We've seen a lot of more interesting stats, such as 13.8 tackles compared to 17.4 now. Shows a lot more tackles as well as tackles to retain possession. And we also saw some other stuff. One big change, 14.6 clearances compared to 25.6 now. So it shows that the defense is doing their homework a lot. Got a ton of more stats that I want to get to, but just some interesting numbers to take a look at. And so, yeah, I think that there's a lot of really interesting numbers to get to. But Barney, Albert, what can we make of Paços's renaissance in form lately?
I think a lot to do with it is confidence, Zach. I think Peixoto, perhaps as bad a start to the season as he had, maybe was let go a little too early. Obviously, we saw that in the fact that he was brought back, and there was rumours that that some of the players had a lot to do with his reappointment this season. And since then, I think those players have repaid perhaps the faith that he showed in them. Nigel Thomas is a prime example of that, I believe, because he had a very slow start to the season, but he's brimming with confidence right now. He's playing some really nice football, and you can see that on the pitch. But also, it was really interesting hearing those defensive statistics there, particularly the clearances, because the return of Maracas into that back line, he sort of departed in the summer, and as a player that I remember me and Albert watching him at the Tottenham Stadium, when they had their famous Europa Conference League qualification run, and he was decent, and he's certainly helped. He's been a boost to Ruben Lima, who's I think a really good young centre back, and yeah, I think the main thing for me is the belief is there. They would have had a shock to the system at midway through the season when they were winless and time ran out. They said they needed to pull their fingers out, and I think they've done that. Particularly Nicolas Gaitan, he's playing the best football I've seen in the Paços de Ferreira shirt. I think he's disappointed me before then, but since coming back in this year, he's been phenomenal. Just incredible.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And the thing is, we kind of laughed when César Peixoto came back, right? And it was laughable. It was a bizarre situation. But the interesting thing was his comments when he came back, and he said very strongly that he had unfinished business and that he still very much believed in what they were doing. And I think those stats were great, Zach, that you read out, because more than anything, there's no new personnel that are generating those improvements. It's the same team. So more than anything, those stats illustrate a team with belief. As Barney said, that word is what's most important. Belief, believing that you can win games, because when that goes, it's catastrophic, and it accounts for players who are playing. When you walk onto a football pitch believing that you're going to lose, how do you come back from that? It's so hard. So now I think Paços walk onto the pitch believing that they can get a result or get a win. And I think you see that in their performance. The thing that I was saying on our most recent podcast was that, there's players, they're doing things that they weren't doing before. They're making runs that they weren't making before. They're trying passes that they weren't making before. They're getting shots off that they weren't taking before. And all of those things are starting to add up. They're in a really good run of form. They've got a good run of games coming up as well, winnable games. I haven't got them to hand, you have to forgive me. But if you look at their upcoming fixtures, they've got winnable games coming up. So this is a real chance for them to get points on the table. As you said, the game's happening right now. The second half's just kicked off. I'm hoping we can give the listeners a live update on this podcast when the game finishes. But they've got a real chance of beating Portimonense and putting some points on the table. So it's the Premier League's most unlikely story this season, but it is happening. So, what I said to our listeners on our last podcast was just keep an eye on Paços, because this is the team to follow. Genuinely, this story is the team to follow for the second half of the season.
Portimonense going to Guimarães next, and we'll be taking on Vitória. Paços, on the other hand, will be going to Estoril Praia. Which one of it? Barney, was it you, or Albert, was it you who was praising Maracas?
It was me praising Maracas.
Have some interesting news for you. Maracas got a yellow at the 39th minute and got a second yellow in the 47th minute. So Costa is going to be playing the next 40 minutes down a man.
Nice.
We'll see what happens, because Portimonense have been getting plenty of players sent off as well as of late. But yeah, we shall see what happens with that. I want to just mention one more name with regards to Paços, because I do think that he needs some attention. 2 seasons ago, we saw Ryan Gauld emerge as one of the best players in Portugal, despite Farense's relegation. This year, we're seeing some more Scottish players having their influence. Michael Johnston doing fairly well at Vitória, and Jordan Holsgrove really doing well. 23 years of age, and this is a midfielder who I really do feel like he could be playing for a top side in Portugal. He's got an above average pass, in terms of retaining the ball under pressure, in terms of finding a man with this pass, in terms of just staying calm on the ball and not panicking. We saw him grab a fantastic goal against Braga, but yeah, he's been really putting in some impressive performances in the middle of the pitch. What have you guys made of Holsgrove so far?
I think he's certainly, now he's been given his opportunity in that midfield, he's improved it drastically. The combination of Pires and Luis Carlos sort of almost behind him allows him to be that midfielder to sort of get forward. I think previously that role had been sort of given to Macho João, who is a player I like, but I think since Holsgrove's come in, he's a lot more accomplished, and I think you're right about his ball retaining. I think that's spot on. That's what Paços need, and he's certainly delivered that. I mean, I loved his goal the other day. I mean, that was a hell of a finish, and it was great to see. But I think, yeah, he seems to be a player that César Peixoto has trusted and given him a bit more of a run in the team, and he's paying it back dividends. I think he's looking like it's not quite in Gould's level yet, because obviously I'm Ryan Gould's biggest fan, and he's not quite there for me. But yeah, he's certainly looking very, very good.
Well, they don't call him the Scottish Iniesta for nothing. But no, he's another one. He's another one like Nigel Thomas, I think, who kind of came into this team at the beginning of the season on loan, moving to a new country, and were looking for something to help them settle in, and they kind of found the opposite of that in the situation that Paços were in. So it must have been really hard for those players to bed in, and I think that's really why they didn't kick on when they first arrived, because it was a really difficult situation that they were walking into on and off the pitch, And I credit Peixoto with being the leader that's kind of helped them get to where they are now. He's a great leader, and clearly he commands the respect and belief of the players. So yeah, it's great to see him doing well. And when I said about Paços that they're taking shots that they weren't taking before, that goal that Barney just alluded to, I forget which game it was in, but it was a left-footed finish from outside of the box into the top corner. A shot that probably he wouldn't have tried before Christmas. So and he's reaping the benefits. So yeah, another player like Nigel Thomas who's really, really improved since Peixoto came back.
All right, guys, enough beating around the bush. Let's talk about the top-ranked team in Portugal right now, Sport Lisboa Benfica. Wow, lot to talk about with regards to Benfica, but they are on a fantastic run of form, as usual this season under Roger Schmidt. Since drawing 2-2 at home to Sporting, they have won 4 straight games, scored a total of 13 goals and conceded a total of 0 goals. Past few games, they've been dealing with some key absences, and at the weekend, taking on a Casa Pia side who've been, very tough. A Casa Pia side that just drew 0-0 to Porto, that's beaten Braga, and yet Benfica doing very well, grabbing the opener within 35 minutes from João Mario, and adding to that in the 43rd minute from João Mario, Alexander Ba picking up an assist from João Mario and scoring a phenomenal solo goal. So, they took on Casa Pia without quite a few players in their starting lineup, such as Gonçalo Ramos, such as Enzo Fernandez, obviously he's a Chelsea player now, such as Rafa Silva, returning to the action, coming off the bench, and yet, have had to deal with quite a few key absences lately, and yet have been perfect. Benfica are, as I said, 8 points clear at the moment, having played a game more than their rivals, and this is a Benfica team that are just playing some fantastic football at the moment. I know that there have been some games where they haven't had that much in the way of firepower. I think that Arauca and Paços have been 2 examples of that. They weren't really firing on goal as much, and yet were able to defend comfortably. And I think that's a big thing that we need to mention about Benfica. Yes, they have the best attack in the league, 51 goals in comparison to Porto's 45 and Braga's 43. But they also have the second best defense in Portugal right now, with just 12 goals conceded. Porto have 11. This is a team that are solid at the back. And as they say, defense wins championships. They've got a fantastic defensive midfielder in Florentino Luis. They've got Alex Grimaldo, who I'd argue is the best fullback in the league right now. Alexander Ba coming into his own, still a lot of room for improvement. Same could be said about Antonio Silva, but he's having a fantastic debut season in Portugal alongside Nicolas Otamendi. Odysseus Vlachodimos as well, kind of the ugly duckling, but has been doing fairly well. So I do think that despite the loss of Enzo to Chelsea, this is still a team that has that backbone, that has that stability in the back line to win the title. Guys, talk to me about Benfica.
Well, yeah, I think I agree with everything you said there. I think, and any other season, losing a player for 120 million euros would probably be seen as disastrous, but I think they've got the depth and they've got the setup as well under Roger Schmidt to sort of, for that not to really be an issue. I think you're certainly right to highlight their defence and being a key part of their success. I think it was quite fitting. I thought that the sort of send off for Andre Almeida in the last game, seeing that, but then also seeing Alexander Ba sort of, because let's be real, they've been struggling that, like similar to Porto, they've been struggling that position for a long time now. Gilberto obviously didn't cut it. Tavares is long gone now, and I think Ba is probably the best they've had in that position for a few seasons now, and I think he's going to go from strength to strength. I mean, his goal was, that run was incredible, but it's not his attacking attributes; it's also his defensive attributes that he's quite solid on. And then, I think he said Antonio Silva potentially has room to improve. It's hard to see how much more he can improve. He's been absolutely phenomenal, just unbelievable. So yeah, I think, that's been important for them as well. That there's a player there who's literally playing out of his skin. This young kid, alongside the experience of Otamendi, and it just works. It works an absolute treat. And Zach, I've got to credit you, mate, because I saw you put a tweet a week or two ago about when it became clear that Enzo was leaving, about Chiquinho, and saying, I wonder how important he's going to be in Roger Schmidt's plans. And personally, I'd written Chiquinho off, but man, he came in last game and delivered a hell of a performance. I mean, you didn't really notice Enzo Fernandez had gone. He was really, really good in that midfield, and just shows you the strength and depth that Benfica have.
Let's talk about Chiquinho. This is a player who I think a lot of people expected to not even be in the Benfica squad. Okay, this is for sure a late bloomer. Came to Benfica in 2018 and was dismissed. Went to Moreirense actually on the day of his birthday. There was actually record coming out with a front page cover today about Chiquinho, a front page cover about Chiquinho. So yeah, in 2018 he was dismissed by Luis Felipe Vieira on the day of his birthday and against the wishes of manager Rui Vitória. Went to Moreirense, came back the following year to Benfica, and then went out on loan to Braga, and then Turkish side Giresunspor. A lot of people did not expect him to be playing at all. Began the season as the sixth choice midfielder, and yet with Enzo Fernandez leaving on deadline day, he has a good chance of becoming a starter. He has started the last two games for Benfica. And yeah, this is a player who rejected a proposal to earn 4 times as much as in Saudi Arabia because he wanted to stay and play a key role in Benfica's title. And I think that we have to give him a lot of credit. Now, he's had some fine performances. He's come in and done a job coming off the bench and has performed well in limited minutes. I'm very curious to see how Benfica shape up now because obviously, Enzo was so important in midfield, but, how is Roger Schmidt going to tweak things now that Rafa Silva and, it seems, Gonçalo Ramos are going to be back to full fitness soon? The past 2 games, we've seen Chiquinho play alongside Florentino Luis in the double pivot, Frederic Arsenis, David Neres, Gonçalo Guedes, and as well as João Mario operating as that front four. How are they going to fit these players in? I think that's a big question. I would be tempted to say drop Chiquinho from the team, go with Frederic Arsenis and Florentino in the double pivot, and then have João Mario, Rafa Silva, Gonçalo Guedes, and Gonçalo Ramos. But then, of course, you've got players such as David Neres, Petar Musa, Chiquinho, who are going to make sure that these players are not comfortable in their starting spot. And I think that's really massive because, you look at Porto last season, I think that Porto, obviously they sold their best player in Luis Diaz, and yet they still had so much competition in the squad so that no player was really comfortable in their starting spot. I think that internal competition is so important if you're trying to win the title. But yeah, guys, talk to me. How do you guys think Benfica's strongest team is after Enzo's sale, and how important is Chiquinho going to be as they try to win their first title since 2019?
Well, it's an interesting question there because that depth is going to be, as you say, so important for a team that's not only planning to win the league, but is planning a very serious Champions League campaign. I'm sure Benfica will have really high aspirations for what they can do in the Champions League, especially getting quite a favourable draw, shall we say, against Brugge. That's a great opportunity for them to progress. So, listen, Chiquinho, it's an interesting one. I unlike Barney, I didn't write him off, but I think that was because I also tempered my expectations of what he was going to offer Benfica. And let me say this, I don't want this to sound like I'm damning him with faint praise, but I think he'll benefit from 2 things. One, he'll benefit from playing in a better starting 11 with better players around him. And also, I think he'll benefit from not having pressure on him to be a standout performer. I think Chiquinho is a good player and he can absolutely contribute to a team of Benfica's stature. I'm not saying he's going to be the best player. I'm not saying he's going to be someone who demands a place in the starting 11. But I think what we saw at the weekend was that he's got more than enough quality to perform in the Premier League at the top level, in my opinion. I've always said that to win the Premier League, you don't necessarily need 11 Champions League standard players on the pitch every game. Let's just be honest, you don't, because if you're beating teams like Casapia or Famalicão, Paços de Ferreira, you don't need a Champions League level team to do that. So players like Chiquinho, who are not quite the top level of players in the Premier League, but of a standard that which Benfica bought him in the first place, he has enough quality to contribute. So I think, as you kind of alluded to, Zach, he will be a kind of rotation player now that Enzo Fernandez is gone, but someone who could come in and be a creative midfield player when they need it in games where perhaps there's slightly less pressure. To answer your question about how will Roger Schmidt line up his team for the biggest games, I don't think Chiquinho will be starting in those games. But he's a great player to play perhaps the weekend before a Champions League place when you've only got a mid-table Premier League side coming to the Estoril de Luz. And I think he will, if given the confidence by his manager and the belief, I think he will perform that role perfectly adequately, as we saw at the weekend.
I think the thing that throws me is Roger Schmidt's persistence in playing Alsness on the almost like a left winger, and something that on the surface, like perhaps many people don't understand why, but what I think it does seem to, in a bizarre way, work very well, and similarly potentially to João Mario on the other side. These players who aren't born with great pace or amazing dribbling skills, but they it all seems to work, doesn't it? Because they're able to sort of play these passes, they're comfortable on the ball, and can take that time to sort of bring other players into play, say, be it Alexander Bar or Grimaldo on the other side. So my heart wants me to drop into that double pivot and then allow João Mario, Rafa, Gonçalo Guedes and Goncalo Ramos to do the rest up top. But I feel like I can see Roger Schmidt persisting with this Alsness on the left and mixing things up. I think perhaps my main thing for me with Benfica's success is getting Goncalo Ramos back into that striking position. He does sort of have this aura around him of sort of not being a great finisher, but I think out of their options, he's the best player to play that position, and I think the team works well when he's in that position. Rafa getting up there as well. So I want Rafa and Goncalo Ramos to be in that starting 11 for me, certainly.
One last thing, guys. Let's talk a little bit about João Mario. Scored the one goal in Benfica's 1-0 win against Portimonense to kick off 2023. Scored against Paços de Ferreira in their 2-0 win. Since then, he scored 2 straight braces against Arauca and Casapia, as well as an assist against Casapia. And he currently is the top scorer in the league with 12 goals alongside Gonçalo Ramos and Fran Navarro. Most goal contributions in the league with 16 alongside Meri Taremi, reinvented in a new position and has just been so important. There was a lot of reports saying, is João Mario going to even stay at Benfica after he fell out of favor with Nelson Verissimo last season? But he stayed put. He's been absolutely massive, and it helped to end a 19-year title drought at Sporting. Can he do the same 4-year title drought at Benfica?
Yeah, definitely. Go on, Barney.
I was going to say, yeah, definitely. I mean, just as well because, I think it was this time last year. I might have been laughing at Benfica for having splashed the cash on him compared to that, and seeing as Sporting didn't, and I thought Sporting had potentially, done themselves a favour by not buying him, but it's worked out so well, and I think you're right there, Zach, about it's this new position that's he's reaping the rewards. We're seeing. I think the thing with him in this more advanced position is his intelligence and the way he reads the game, right, and he can get into positions that are just right, and he's in the right place at the right time. That's why he's getting so many goals. And obviously he's got that mentality and that experience that some of the other players in that Benfica team, the younger players won't have, and he's going to bring that element to this team, a sort of winning mentality. So yeah, a huge player for them, and we'll probably look at the end of the season and just be astonished at what he's achieved, considering where he was this time last year.
Casa Pia going to be taking on Nacional in the Taça de Portugal quarterfinals midweek before going to Boa Vista. Benfica, on the other hand, will be taking on Braga in the Taça de Portugal quarterfinals before playing Club Brugge in the Champions League round of 16. And yeah, we've got a question from one of our listeners who wants to know, Benfica obviously have made it to the round of 16, topped their group, been a good start to their Champions League journey, but do they have the potential to upset some teams and go very far? This question comes from Alfonso Cunha. I'm confident in facing many teams and only really scared of Madrid, Bayern, City, PSG, and Liverpool. So yeah, guys, I think that I'm a bit concerned because a lot of Benfica fans are talking about, we can go to the quarterfinals and then make it far. And usually when fans say that, they end up losing to Club Brugge or something. I think that I remember people saying that about Ajax last season. Now they were going to go so far only for them to lose to Benfica. So guys, Club Brugge, let's not write them off. But yeah, guys, how far do you think this Benfica team can go in Europe?
Well, look, they can absolutely cause some upsets. Why not? I mean, I'm assuming this question came from a Benfica fan, so they may not appreciate me comparing it to Porto, but we've seen what Porto have done in the Champions League recently. A team on fire in the Premier League with a good squad in good form. Absolutely, there are teams that are ready for the taking. Benfica will go into a lot of games, obviously after the Club Brugge game, they'll go into those games as underdogs. But they've got to be open to that situation, open to that scenario, and just believe in the quality that they've got. So, yeah, absolutely. To put it, a short answer, absolutely, they can upset some big teams in the Champions League. Why not?
And I think it's what you said earlier, Zach, about defenses win championships and defenses. Good defenses do well in the Champions League as well. If you're able to keep things tight, and then have players like Rafa who will just can produce some magic. I guess the other thing to add is that in Roger Schmidt, they have a manager who's got a system that's working, and his game preparation is generally in the league certainly been spot on. He's always worked out a way to get the wins in, and I think that will serve them well in the Champions League as well.
For sure. It will be very interesting to see what happens. Guys, I want to move on to the final match of Saturday. Got a chance to watch it. Really interesting game between Estoril Praia and Vitória de Guimarães. Afonso Freitas setting up Alisson Safeira for the opening goal within 11 minutes. Vitória getting a 1-0 win at Estoril. Good day, good week for Safeira, I must say. This is a player who joined Vitória on deadline day, was kind of a backup, if I remember correctly, at BSAD last season, wasn't able to help them stay up, but January 30th scores a 97th minute goal to win it against 2-1 against Chaves, just 2 minutes after Chaves equalized. This time he scores after 11 minutes to grab a 1-0 win for Vitória. Interesting year for Vitória. They are 6th in the table, actually level on points with Casa Pia. So currently, level on points with 5th place Casa Pia and 5 points away from Sporting, who have a game in hand. A lot of, there's a lot to talk about with Vitória. There's a lot of promising young players to talk about, such as Dani Silva, Ibrahima Bamba, and yeah, just a lot of quality. Been a very hot and cold season for them, as it always is. But once again, this is a team that, for the most part, is always in the race for that final European position. What have we made of Vitória so far under their rookie manager, Moreno?
Yeah, I mean, this has been the story of Vitória for the last few seasons now, hasn't it? Just not quite being as good as we hoped they would, but not quite descending to a level where we need to be worried about them. And this type of win for them, picking up a 1-0 win away at Estoril, very important. But that's what they build their season around, picking up these wins against mid-table sides, and that's how they managed to sustain their kind of top 7 or top 6 position, shall we say, because they never really trouble the bigger teams. Safir is an interesting one, isn't he? Because he's kind of come out of nowhere. I think didn't they sign at least 2 strikers in the summer who kind of been above him in the pecking order, and yet he comes in 2 goals in 2 games. Listen, you can't deny it. Let's see if it's a flash in the pan or whether he's ready to contribute for the rest of the season. But they've been okay. They've been fine, and they will be fine as they have been in recent years. How have they done under the new manager? Well, I quite like him. I think he's probably got pretty much the best out of the squad of players that he's got. If they can keep the core of this squad together for next season, maybe they can do something better. But for me, I just think Vitória are in a moment where they just don't look quite ready to really challenge for anything other than mediocrity, or at least mediocrity within their context, which will always be top 7, top 6, looking for that last European place. So, in that sense, they've done absolutely fine, and they've avoided disasters, which I think some people predicted at the beginning of the season that they might have a tough season after some big sales. So, things are looking fine at the moment.
I would just go on to say that I think that Moreno's done, in my opinion, incredibly well, but considering the amount of injuries and players that he's had to bring in and out of that team, they haven't had a settled 11 all season. There's so many players have come in and out. Like Safari is a prime example. Getting his opportunity in the team and fortunately getting the goals, but that attack has been chopped and changed so much. There's, I guess, the sort of inconsistency is perhaps faltered Moreno's progress he's made with the team, because defensively they've been very consistent. You look at that back three of Amaro, Bamba, and Villanueva. That's a good defence. I like that. I've also Zé Carlos. I forgot to mention his potential, one of the better right backs in this league, or the right mid. But he's now injured. And Maga's back. But it's been a tough season for Moreno in terms of managing his squad and the teams he can put out. But if taking it into consideration, I think they've done particularly well, and perhaps gone under the radar, particularly with how the amount of points they've managed to pick up.
Safira is level with André Silva on 2 goals and 1 goal behind Anderson Silva, Nelson Dalush, and Thiago Silva as the top scorer with 3 goals. So, there hasn't been this Oscar Estupinian figure in the goals for Vitória. I know he's doing fairly well in the championship, but Vitória are getting their goals from different places, and yet it's working out fairly well for them. I think that this is a team that is doing fairly well. Only a -2 goal differential. Interestingly, only one team outside of the top 4 has a positive goal differential. Can either of you guess which it is?
Casapia?
Not Casapia. Not after the 3-0 loss to Benfica.
Good point. No, who is it?
Vizela, +2.
That would have been my second guess, and I'm not just saying that.
Okay. But Vitória, as you mentioned, they're a team that has a lot of talent. They still need to establish that lineup and establish some consistency. It is hard to get consistency when you are working with so many young players. That's just natural. But there's a lot of talent here in Vitória. I think that keeping hold of Ibrahima Bamba, absolutely massive, considering the fact that they've sold Marcus Edwards and Edmund Tapsoba on previous January deadline days. So I think that keeping hold of him, keeping hold of other key players, going to be very important as they look to return to European football. But Vitória beating Estoril 1-0. Estoril are currently 4 points above the relegation playoff spot, 6 points above Maritimo, and 9 points above Paços as things stand. They've played 1 game fewer, and will actually play that makeup game against Boa Vista. They were set to play Boa Vista in December, but Estoril Stadium, actually their lights malfunctioned, so they weren't able to play that game, and now going to be playing that 2 months later. And just a sneak peek, guys. Stay tuned for my exclusive interview with Estoril Praia's Bernardo Vital coming up in a few days. Really had a great time interviewing him. For me, one of the most promising defenders in the Primera, so very excited for that. I want to talk about Estoril, though, because I have to say I'm very worried for them. They have not won. They have won just one league match since October 8th, and that was the 2-0 win against Casapia. Okay. A Casapia side that fell to 10 men in the 55th minute. So yeah, opened 2023 with a 2-0 defeat to Arauca. Beat Casapia 2-0, lost 1-0 to Marítimo, lost 1-0 to Famalicão, and lost 1-0 to Vitória. So they've been held scoreless for 4 of the last 5 games. I'm not great at data, but I don't think that's a good pattern. But yeah, guys, should we be concerned about Estoril Praia? And also, we've had quite a few managers get the axe this season. How concerned should we be about Nelson Verissimo becoming the next one?
We shouldn't be concerned because they've signed Cassiano to play up top.
I knew he was going to say that. I didn't even bother trying to come in.
We just had a great discussion on Brazilian journeyman strikers like Ferreira, and now you're dissing Cassiano. What the hell?
No. For the record, I love Cassiano. I'm just laughing at Barney's predictability.
No, I mean, we both love Cassiano in the podcast. We thought it was great. It was in the last season, but he's not a. I don't. He might get a few goals, but I don't think he's going to get enough. I think the issue at Estoril has been clear now for a little while that they've got excellent creative players in Francisco Gerardes and Thiago Gouveia. But they need someone to put the ball in the net essentially, and yeah, it's Cassiano seems to be the man they've highlighted in this January transfer window to be that man. And I don't know, I can't help but think they could have got someone a little bit different, perhaps. But yeah, they didn't. So yeah, I think that is my huge worry for Verissimo as a manager, because I've always felt Estoril have got a very decent squad, a very exciting squad, but he doesn't seem to be getting the best out of those players and those players who we know can certainly deliver creatively.
Yeah, I think just to comment on that point about should Verissimo stay, I'm a bit torn because, like Barney, I am disappointed with them, and I had expected a bit better from them this season. But I think he's a young manager, and when you look at the landscape of Portuguese managers available at the moment, I'm not sure there's an obvious candidate to replace him who you could be confident would come in and improve things. I think perhaps a little bit of the hope that was placed on Marítimo was a little bit misguided, because when you start to really kind of look at, Estoril, when you start to look at their starting 11s on match days, I think if you're being honest, it's the performances and results that they're getting are probably not a million miles away from what the players that they've got should be achieving. I think they've got one or two standout players. Gouveia is an obvious one. And as Barney said, Gerardes he's been excellent this season. He's been a real leader. But after that, I'm not sure how many real standout players they've got at the moment, but it is a young team. So I think if they stick with Verissimo and they stick with the kind of young squad that they've got, I think this is a team that could kind of bear the fruit of their labours, perhaps not this season, but maybe in the next season.
And to your point, Nelson Verissimo obviously has spent a lot of time working at Benfica's academy. Estoril are a team that, yes, they want to stay in the league, they want to win, but they also want to develop young players, make them into better players, and sell them for massive profits. And I think that Verissimo is the ideal blueprint for that. But yeah, with that being said, just some interesting decisions. Kind of been playing more defensively. It seems like more of a back three. and yeah, dropped Thiago Santos from the team against Vitória. I'm not really sure why. I think that he's one of the best right backs in the league. And yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how he's going to turn things around because, as you mentioned, they just don't really have a player who's banging in the goals at the moment. They've got plenty of creative players like Thiago Gouveia, just got in Rafiki Khan, and I'm really excited to see how that goes because he was fantastic for Marítimo. Very excited to see if he can make an impact at Estoril. But yeah, to your point, their top goal scorer, Thiago Gouveia and James Leia Saliki, with 3 goals each. Top assister, Thiago Gouveia, with 4 assists. So yeah, I'm just not seeing the goals from Estoril right now. And overall, yeah, this is a team that is in desperate need of results. Hopefully, they can turn things around. They're going to need to get it in their next few games. We'll be hosting Boavista, taking on Rio Ave and Vila de Conde, and then playing Estoril, playing Paços de Ferreira as well as Sporting. So we'll see what happens with Estoril. There's a lot of talent. Is there enough? Is there enough finishers though? Is there enough efficiency in the final third? I think that's a real concern of mine when I think about Estoril. So we shall see what happens, but. Yeah, I am a bit worried for them, I must say. Moving forward to some other games, though, let's talk about the first matchup of Sunday, Braga taking on Famalicão. This was a really big game for Braga. They had just come off a 5-0 defeat to Sporting. No Siku Nyakate after he picked up a red card against Sporting. But yeah, Braga taking the lead within 22 minutes via an own goal from Ene Mehaj. Famalicão drawing level in the 71st minute. Leandro Sanca is scoring just seconds after coming on. And yet in the 79th minute, a beautiful team goal from Braga resulting in Simon Banza scoring in the 79th minute. And then we saw Bruma come off the bench and score a brace. Bruma making his debut for Braga after joining in the January window. Hadn't scored since May, and he scores a brace to lead Braga to a 4-1 win against Famalicão. So, this was a massive performance from Braga. This was not an easy game, and it certainly wasn't as it was. I think it was a lot closer than the scoreline indicates. But yeah, this is Braga gutting out a massive win. We've talked a lot about Braga. We've talked about their Estrelinha, how they can just seem to gut out results in the dying moments. And I think that, yeah, this was another real test of their mentality, and they came out alive. I think that the player we have to start by discussing is Simon Banza. Two ex-Famalicão players in this Braga lineup with Simon Banza and Uros Rasic. Banza joined on loan from Len on deadline day last season, scored 16 goals for Famalicão before joining Braga in a permanent deal for, I believe, 5 million euros. Had a phenomenal start to the season and scored 5 goals and 1 assist by the end of August. Hadn't scored in a few months and had lost his place in the team, but scored a goal against Paços de Ferreira, the 97th minute winner, and then scoring against Famalicão. Had a bit of a slow performance against Sporting, but with Vitinha going to Marseille, I think that all eyes are on Banza to step up and take his spot alongside Abel Ruiz in the attack. And yeah, I think that it's an interesting one because, like I said, all these teams who sold a key player, they didn't sign any player to replace them. So Sporting are going to have to rely on. Sporting did sign Hector Bellerin. That is my mistake. But I think that they're going to have to rely on Bellerin and Escaio at the right wing back position. Benfica going to have to rely on Chiquinho and a few others in the midfield position. Whereas Braga, they are going to have to rely on Simon Banza, a player who's shown that he can deliver and score goals in this league. A player who needs to, get back to his full confidence, his best form. Guys, how confident are you in Braga replacing Vitinha's goals?
Yeah, listen, Simon Banza has always been, in my opinion, a player who goes through patches of form rather than consistency. I said that the whole season he was at Famalicão, a great goal scoring return for Famalicão. I believe it was 15 goals. But he always seemed to have a habit of scoring 2 or 3 goals in one game and then going another 2, 3, 4 games without a goal. The difference of Famalicão was, of course, he was the main striker and there was no competition. So he was always in the team and those patches of form were close together. The difference of Braga, of course, was that he had real competition. So when he went through a patch of not scoring, he had someone to come in and take his place. And I think that's why we've seen him go for a longer period without scoring, because he's not had the consistency in minutes. There's no doubt about his ability to score goals, of course. And I think, obviously, Braga's loss, I think, is Simon Banza's gain, because now one obstacle to him playing regularly in Vitinha, a huge obstacle, has been removed, and he has a clearer path to more minutes up front for Braga. And I think he will deliver. I think we saw in this game what he's all about. It's not fancy, but he knows how to put the ball in the back of the net. He knows how to get into areas, dangerous areas where the ball's going to be. And I think 9 times out of 10, he will finish a chance when it comes his way. So I feel confident that Banza has the ability to score goals for Braga. The one thing I worry about slightly is just the fact that Braga have lost depth up front, because we know that Braga like to play 2 up front, and now with only 2 strikers, suddenly you've only got 2 options. So that's not a great position to be in. And maybe that will be where they're let down rather than on an individual player basis. But yeah, look, I think Simon Banza, I still back him to be the player that Braga want him to be, definitely.
I think with the thing we also have to look at, though, in Braga's transfer window is the signing of Pizzi and Bruma, who obviously got the 2 goals in this game. And what that does, I think, is gives them options in the formation that they do play, because when they came back off the winter break, they sort of went with the one striker. They brought an extra man into the field, Andre Horto, whoever it was, and they actually played some really good football. That win against Benfica, for example, So in Bruma arriving and Pizzi arriving, as we saw towards the end of this game, they're able to change things up to play a slightly different formation and reap the benefits of that flexibility.
And as you mentioned, Marnie, right, that win against Benfica, arguably their best performance of the season. We saw, Yori Medeiros, Ricardo Horta on the flanks with Andre Horta, Almus Frate, and Uros Rasic. So almost a midfield 3 with Abel Ruiz operating as a center forward. We saw against Sporting Arthur Jorge going for some, a 3-4-3 almost like he was trying to recreate a team from Carlos Carvalhal. Did not work at all, and they got destroyed. But yeah, I think that Braga, they do have flexibility, and I think that Pizzi and Bruma are going to provide an instant impact. Joe Mendes, they also signed this promising Swedish fullback for 1.5 million euros. Will be interesting to see what impact he can provide. But I think that Braga, despite losing Vitinha, they've done well in the window. And they are definitely going to be continuing to chase down a Champions League spot. They're not in the Europa League anymore. They're in the Europa Conference League. So they're going to be taking on Benfica in the Taça de Portugal quarterfinals, then traveling to Marítimo, and then playing Fiorentina in the Europa Conference League. So we'll see what happens there. But I do think that, as you mentioned, Pizzi and Bruma going to be very important in ensuring that they don't lose their level. I want to talk about another game on Sunday. Chaves taking on Marítimo. Marítimo, been a interesting year for them. Their 3rd manager of the season, I repeat, Jose Gomes, taking over, leading them to a 1-1 draw to Rio Ave after the World Cup break. Then a 1-0 win against Sporting. Marítimo lost 3-0 to Vizela, beat Estoril 1-0, and then lost 2-0 to Porto and 2-1 to Chaves. Bit of a disappointment for Marítimo, who who lost 2-1 in a match that saw 2 defenders score penalty for either side. Marítimo, they are 3 points above Paços and 2 points behind Santa Clara in the relegation playoff spot. Guys, what have you made in recent weeks of this slight improvement under Jose Gomes?
Well, I thought it was a positive start under Jose Gomes. I thought the immediate impact he had was very good. They got, like you say, a good win against Sporting. It's fantastic for their morale. Hasn't quite continued, which is a bit of a shame, but no need to worry yet, in my opinion, obviously, aside from the fact that they're in relegation zone, but 2 points off the playoff, so it's not too bad. I would be confident under him. For some reason, for me, the manager exudes confidence, and I think the players, the response to that, I think Marítimo is a team with less quality in the squad than Paços, if I'm being honest. I don't think Paços' problems were to do with quality, they were to do with psychology and confidence. So Marítimo, if they're going to survive, are going to have to do it in a very different way. I think it's going to be a battle. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be grinding out results. But they've shown that they can do it. So there's reason for optimism. I suppose it depends on what your expectations are. If you're just hoping for survival, I think if I was a Marítimo player under Jose Gomes, I would in this moment be still pretty confident, still thinking I've got a chance to survive, understanding that the rest of the season is going to be a bit of a fight, but knowing that the opportunity is there for them to put points on the table and get wins. It's a bit of a worry when it looks like the only way that they're scoring goals is their right back scoring penalties. That could be an issue. But so many of these teams in this half of the table struggle for goals, so they're not unique in that aspect. But it's going to be tough. But I think there's an opportunity for them to survive if the players commit to what the manager is clearly trying to get them to do.
I think in this fixture, at the beginning of the season, Maurice really looked at playing Shabs away as an opportunity to get points. But as we've seen this season, Shabs are a handy little team in themselves, and certainly don't deserve to be underestimated anyway. I agree mainly with what Alva's take on Marítimo. I think they don't have a good squad as Paços de Ferreira. I think they're going to have to battle their way through survival. I think their recruitment has been really disappointing, to be honest. After the president sort of when he got elected had such high ambitions for them. I think the fact they weren't able to get Rafi Gaitan back was a big blow for them. Obviously, he went to Estoril prior. They need someone like that, really, don't they? They need Jadas hasn't really lived up to expectation. That although he's probably still their best player, but they need more players who can make things happen. And at the moment, it just seems to be Jadas who can do that.
Guys, I want to talk a little bit about Chaves. Returned from the break with a 2-0 defeat to Famalicão, then got 3 consecutive 1-1 draws to Paços, Arauca, and Boa Vista. Lost 2-1 to Vitória via 97th minute winner from Safaira, and then beating Marítimo 2-1. Vitor Campelo's side are currently 8th in the league. They've conducted some business this window, including the arrival of ex-Tondela midfielder João Pedro. Yeah, what do we make of Chaves so far after the first half of the season?
I think before the season started, I thought Chaves were going to be a team that I watched and paid attention to a lot more than I have. I kind of thought they had the makings of a team to cause a bit of an upset. I'm not sure why I quite came to that conclusion, but it hasn't quite happened. They've been, in my opinion, going about their business quite quietly, but doing pretty well. They're comfortably mid-table at the moment. I think that's not something to turn your nose up at for a newly promoted team. The first thing you have to do is survive in the next season, and they look to be doing that comfortably. They've not really set the league alight. I think that's the polite way of putting it. But they've had some good moments, and they've got some interesting players. So I think if I was a Chaves fan, I'd be fairly satisfied, if perhaps a little bit bored by the season. But other than that, I think I'd rather be bored and mid-table than excited by a relegation battle if I was a Chaves fan.
And I really like what they did in the window. Bringing in experienced since Dean Vittoria, he's just absolutely paid back everything that they've seen in him. I've enjoyed their fullbacks this season. I think Langer's a good left back. I thought Correa on the other side is a really exciting, aggressive right back. And Jazz Teixeira hasn't he's sort of arrived with a lot of hype. He was the place to keep an eye on, and I think he's been decent as well. But I think, as Albert said there, not much to talk about, but that's great because they're doing absolutely fine.
Absolutely. Guys, I want to talk about Sunday's final game between Gil Vicente and Arauca. Gil Vicente, in very impressive form, ended 2022 with a 1-0 win against Santa Clara, then lost 1-0 to Boa Vista, got back-to-back wins against Casapia and Victoria before losing 2-1 to Paços, and then drawing 1-1 to Arauca. I think that, this is definitely this was an interesting matchup between two impressive sides, but the two teams share the spoils in Barcelos. First off, talk to me a little bit about Gil Vicente's improvement under Daniel Sousa. I think that we can't deny Fran Navarro has been a key part in that, and I think that keeping hold of Fran Navarro absolutely massive. But it hasn't just been him. This is a team that has gone through a lot, and yet are showing that they still have a lot of quality to offer.
Yeah, I think he's brought back confidence to players like Fujimoto. I think he was a player I tipped for the very top of previous seasons, but his development sort of faltered. But in this, he seems to have a new confidence. Seems to be involved in a lot, creating a lot, which is perhaps a side to his game that I didn't see before. So he's certainly better, and that midfield looks stronger as well. I think Carvalho and Abidjan, certainly looking better. And it's just the system. The lineup hasn't changed. It's the football they're playing, and that's what Sousa's brought. He's brought this sort of. It's exciting to watch again. Basically, Gil Vicente used to be a team that I would try and watch their game every week last season, and so far this season it hasn't been like that. But now they seem to be back at their best and playing some really good football.
Yeah, it's good to see, and I really wanted Daniel Sousa as a manager. I think there was, forgive me, I wish I had the statistics to hand, but there was a point, I think 4 or 5 games after the World Cup where Gil Vicente were the second best team in the league since the World Cup in terms of results that they were getting. So he's done a brilliant job because they were in a tough position, and it wasn't long ago that we were talking about Gil Vicente in the same way that we were talking about Santa Clara as a team that were in danger of getting sucked into a relegation battle. And I think Daniel Sousa's put enough distance between them and the pack now for them to be kind of considered on the up, shall we say, and in good form. And of course, it doesn't hurt when you've got a player like Fran Navarro on your side, who is such a fantastic source of goals. How valuable is that to a team outside of the top 4, to have a goal scorer like that in their side? As you say, it was a slow start to the season, but they've done really well to turn it around. Obviously, when you're sacking managers in the first half of the season, it's not a comfortable position to be in, but they brought in the right man, evidently in Daniel Sousa, and things are definitely on the up. And as Barney says, getting back to the team that we enjoyed watching so much last season, which I think every neutral was happy about.
Alongside João Mario, and a few others, Uday Debag is one of the most informed players in the Primeira Liga right now. Opened 2023 with a brace against Estoril Praia, scored another brace against Portimonense, scored against Sporting in the Taça da Liga, and equalized or opened the scoring for Arauca after 30 minutes. Vitor Carvalho equalizing for Gil shortly after. But, he's a Palestinian center forward who's been in great form. Hasn't always been a starter for Arauca, and yet has been in fine form. Currently the top scorer with 7 goals. The next top scorer has 3 goals. But yeah, guys, talk to me a little bit about Uday Debag.
I mean, I think his goals to game ratio is ridiculous. You mentioned he hasn't been in the team a lot this season, but when he has, he's taken his chances. It's just been surprising. Some of the touches he takes and the goals he's sort of made himself as well have been really impressive. You know, he's of course he's tapped a few, but there's been some real skill involved in some of his goals. And of course, for a team like Arouca, you know, they're I think if you look at their XG, or Dagba himself is outperforming his XG, which is, I think he's only one of two players in the top goal scoring charts who's done that. I think Kuba is for Real, the other. But you need a play like that in a team like Arouca. You need someone who's going to, you know, get goals out of nowhere, and that's what he's done so far this season.
It's interesting. We're just talking about Fran Navarro there. And Zach, you had some great stats from Goal Point earlier. I saw a really great tweet that they did earlier today, I think, or the other day, where they were comparing Dabag to Fran Navarro. Dabag obviously played less games, played less minutes than Fran Navarro, but his goal per game and goal contribution per minute played ratio is actually slightly higher than Fran Navarro, considering he's played, I think, less than half the minutes that Navarro's played, but he's still managed 7 goals in 11 games. That's an incredible return for a player in a team like Arouca. You know, as I was just saying about Fran Navarro, how valuable is it to have a goal scorer in your team? We've had conversations about 3 or 4 clubs just in this podcast alone about mid-table clubs struggling for goals. So it's so valuable. You know, another Arab striker like Taremi, who's come to the Premier League and is making a name for himself. Unfortunately, looks like he'll be leaving us at the end of the season. He'll apparently be leaving for Belgium to go and play with Charleroi, but can't begrudge him and his family a move to somewhere where he may well get a higher salary. But while he's here, he's been a joy to watch, and it's been a great story to follow the bag as well. I believe one of the first Palestinian players to play in the Premier League, and so he's been a great story to follow and a player that I've enjoyed watching, definitely.
Absolutely. Guys, I mentioned him before on last week's podcast, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on Morlai Silla. For me, Arauca's best player against Benfica. Really impressive both on and off the ball, and had a decent game against Gil Vicente. 2 big chances created, 2 key passes, 2 out of 4 long balls completed. Very active both on and off the ball. This is a player who's 24 years of age, from Guinea, and actually just came over from Horoya in Guinea in the summer. So he's only been playing in Europe for a few months and has slowly but surely become a really important player of this Arauca team under Armando Evangelista. You know, currently 7th in the league, and I think that Silla has played his part in that. Yeah,
he's been a player that's just completely taken by surprise. You know, it is remarkable the fact that this is his first time playing in Europe, because he's just adapted. He seems to have just settled so quickly. His energy's so impressive. You know, he gets about that pitch, but I like him on the ball as well, and he's not afraid to take a shot from distance. I think he got a goal early in the season, didn't he? But he's been a player who's. That's the thing with Arouca generally, isn't it? That their transfer business has been so impressive. I remember I read an article about Evangelista a few weeks ago where he was talking about how, you know, they've had to look at areas that other teams might not be looking to unearth these sort of players who can, I guess, a sort of a smaller version of what Brighton do if you're going to compare them to sort of a Premier League club. But, you know, unearthing these players from untapped markets, let's say, and Sida coming from Guinea is certainly that. And the bag as well, we've just been talking about, you know, players that have come in and brought into Evangelista's system. You know, they play quite a quick, direct football, Arouca, that I would say, and having a player like Silla in midfield who's able to get up and back and up and down the pitch is vitally important. And having a striker like the bag who's, you know, relentless and quick and nippy, and will try and get onto those balls as well. Those direct long balls there is vitally important to Arouca and sort of key to a lot of their success this season.
Absolutely. Guys, have a quick score update for you. So Paços went down to 10 men at the 47th minute and held a clean sheet for 51 minutes until the 98th minute when Mauricio scored a goal for Portimonense. So that just about sums up
Wow.
Paços' season, right? Playing down a man for the entire second half and conceding the final second.
Yeah.
That is Portimonense's first win since November 4th, okay? So yeah, not too
Massive
shabby,
result.
not too shabby, and just their third, their second clean sheet since the start of October. Interesting. We'll see if that can turn things around for Portimonense. But yeah, guys, we want to talk a little bit about the final match of the Primeira Liga weekend. Rio Ave are hosting Sporting. Really excited for this match. Sporting have gone with pretty much the same lineup, I believe, as the previous game. No Sebastian Coates in defense. Not sure if that's suspension or injury. But we've got Mateus Reis, Gonçalo Inácio, Jeremiah St. Just in central defense. Nuno Santos, Manuel Ugarte, Idemacio Morita, Ricardo Escaio in midfield, and an attack of Pedro Gonçalves, Marcus Edwards, Youssef Chermiti, Antonio Don obviously in goal. But I want to talk a little bit about Chermiti. You know, he made his debut against Benfica on January 15th and was really thrown into the deep end with Paulinho getting sent off in the Taça Liga final. Made his first start against Braga, and I felt did very well, occupying the defenders, had a lovely back heel assist. This is a player who Ruben Amorim has stated, you know, if this kid signs a new contract, I will not sign a center forward. Okay, an 18-year-old who hadn't played a minute of senior football until January 15th. Did very well against Braga, I must say. Excited to see how he does against Rio Ave. Yeah, curious. Do you think that Chermiti can push Paulinho for the starting center forward spot?
Well, look, I have to be honest about Chermiti. The first time I watched him play, I thought he looked pretty bad. I didn't get it. I didn't know why he was playing, especially as you say, because he wasn't exactly part of the kind of youth players that were being integrated into the first team. He then started against Braga, and I thought, here we go. You know, this will be funny. And honestly, 20 minutes later, I was eating my words because I thought, as you say, he did really well. And I sort of started to look at him in a different way and realised that he was a player who can contribute. He's a tall player. His first touch is not his best attribute, but he's athletic. He's committed to the game. He causes defences all sorts of problems just by getting himself in between the ball and defenders and really making a nuisance of himself. And I don't think it was really a coincidence that he got at least one goal involvement in that game. He probably could have scored himself on one or two occasions. So yeah, I have to be totally honest that my initial assessment was probably wrong. I think he's a talented young player with good attributes, and I think he just needs time because clearly he was chucked in at the deep end on his first game for the club. And so it's natural that a young player like that is going to need some time to settle in. But I think we started to see what he can contribute against Braga. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to watch this game with him starting up front and see how he does.
I mean, if I was a defender, I think I'd rather play against Paulinho than Chermiti, on the basis of what I've seen so far. I think he looks like an annoying player, somebody who just will chase every ball and like Albert said, just try and get himself in his body in between you and the ball. And so yeah, I think, but I think the crux of it is going to be his goals, right? Because Paulinho is judged by so many Sporting fans on his lack of goals, and they need a striker to be scoring. Essentially, that's been one of their issues. So he needs to score basically, and yeah, he hasn't had too many opportunities, so it's been quite hard to judge about his shooting. But in an extended run in the team, he's going to get those chances, and that's what we have to judge him on.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember watching him against Benfica in his first game, and he received a long ball, and it seemed like Sporting, they were so close to getting that final goal, and I think it was the 93rd minute. Could have squared it to I think it was Pedro Gonçalves, and ended up blasting over. Kind of thing that you'd expect from Albert in his Sunday League team. But Chermiti, I think, he's very young. He's got a lot of potential. a player who, as you mentioned, he's very physical. He's only 18, but not only is he 6'4", he's also got a lot of muscle on him. You can tell that he kind of relishes the opportunity to chase down these long balls, to battle with the defenders, and I like that. I like a player who's not gonna shy away from physical battle. So we'll see what happens in this game. But yeah, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on for almost 2 hours to discuss Portuguese football. Anything else you guys want to mention?
I will just add that I did score 5 goals on Sunday. That's the thing I'll say. No, look, Zach.
Aaron should be looking at you, Albert.
Listen, if Chermiti wants to give me a call anytime. No, look, Zach, it's been a pleasure.
Maybe in need of your services too, Albert.
Listen, a few weeks in the Algarve sounds fantastic. I'll be there. No, look, seriously, it's been a pleasure, Zach. We always love coming on this show. We're big fans of yourself and what you do. It's been a mammoth episode, but I think you've struggled to find three people, English-speaking people, more committed to Portuguese football than the 3 you've got on this podcast right now. So I think it's all been worth doing. Yeah, once again, thanks for inviting us, and we're happy to come anytime.
Yeah, I just echo that, man. I've loved chatting. It's nice to chat for 2 hours about football. I usually just do an hour, but it's been great to chat about every team. And that's what's so important, is that we're not talking about just the big 4, we're talking about every team, every player. So yeah, pleasure as always, Zach. Thank you.
Guys, absolute pleasure. Make sure you check out Long Ball Futebol. Subscribe to them. Follow them on Twitter. They are phenomenal at what they do and are just a fantastic bunch of guys. Guys, once again, thank you so much, and I hope to have you guys on again soon.
Thank you, Zach.